Warriors Don't Cry, Chapter 9, page 107. Overhead, the helicopter was engaged in its roaring flutter. I relaxed a bit because I was, by the second day, familiar with the military routine of our ride to Central. I allowed myself to become hypnotized by the sight of soldiers executing their duties. I asked Sarge if our escorts in the jeeps felt as odd as we did about being propped up there with those big guns mounted in front of them just to take us to school. "Nope," he said. We do what we're told." Danny was waiting for me near the front door. We nodded to each other as I began the long trip up to my homeroom. The early morning hecklers were full of energy. One girl walked up close behind me, getting between Danny and me. I didn't look back. Instead, I quickened my pace. She started walking on my heels, and when I turned to face her, she spit at me. I ducked and scampered out of her way. To keep my focus, I began saying the Lord's Prayer. "Hey, Melba, pay attention to what you're doing. Watch out," Danny shouted as a group of boys bumped straight into me. One of them kicked me in the shins so hard I fell to the floor. A second kick was delivered to my stomach. Danny stood over me, motioning them to move away. Other soldiers made their presence known. Although they kept their distance, I struggled to my feet. More white students gathered around and taunted me, applauding and cheering. "The N is down." "Stand tall," Danny whispered. "Let's move out." "Why didn't you do something?" I asked. "I'm here for one thing," he said impatiently, "to keep you alive. I'm not allowed to get into verbal or physical battles with these students." As some of the students continued their catcalls, I fought back tears and headed down the stairs to the principal's office. "Did any adult witness this incident?" the woman clerk asked in an unsympathetic tone. "I mean, did any teacher see these people do what you said?" "Yes, ma'am, the soldiers." "They don't count. Besides, they can't identify the people you're accusing." "No, I didn't see any other adults than the soldiers," I answered, feeling the pain in my shin and my stomach. "Well, in order to do anything, we need an adult witness." "Yes, ma'am." Those were the words my mouth said because that's what I had been told was appropriate to say. But another part of me wanted to shout at her and ask her why she didn't believe me or care enough to ask whether or not I needed medical help. "I think you better get to class unless you want us to call an ambulance," she said in a sarcastic tone. I turned to walk out the door. It had hurt my feelings as much to report the incident to her as to live through it. I could see Danny's face. His expression was blank, but his posture was so erect and his stance so commanding that no one would dare to challenge him. Seeing that made me think about my own posture. I had to appear confident and alert. I squared my shoulders, trying not to show how frightened and timid I really felt. I told myself I had to be like a soldier in battle. I couldn't imagine a 101st trooper crying or moping when he got hurt. During the rest of the day, I forced myself to endure annoying little pranks that distracted me and made me nervous, but did not really hurt me. After the ride home in the convoy with the fun game of verbal ping-pong with my friends, the usual group of news reporters once again greeted us at Mrs. Bates' house. That night, I wrote in my diary, "It's hard being with Little Rock white people. I don't know if I can do this integration thing forever. It feels like this is something people do for only a little while. I want to run away now. I want a happy day." The next morning, after a full night's sleep, I felt fresh and new, and the ride with Sarge and the others was a real tonic to start my day. "Smile, it's Friday," Danny said, greeting me at the front door of the school. Few soldiers accompanied us up the front stairs. Their absence meant the defiant chants and hateful words grew much louder. When I stepped inside the school, the soldiers were not as visible as they had been the day before, but I thank God that they were still there. "I'm gonna be in the background today. They're trying to figure out how y'all will get along without us being up real close," Danny said. I nodded to him as though I felt okay with this announcement. I wanted to say, please don't leave my side, but I didn't. I felt myself beginning to rely on him, but I didn't know what else to do. I had never before felt such fear. It was an unfamiliar position, me, counting on a white man to defend me against other white people determined to hurt me. And yet I was resigning myself to the fact that, for the moment, I had no choice but to depend on Danny and God. As with any high school on Friday, the anticipation of the weekend brought excitement, and this was a special Friday for Central High's student body. The occasion for all the hoopla was a big football game that night with Baton Rouge, their arch rival. People had been lingering about the stairwells, cheering and waving pom-poms, making those areas particularly hazardous for the 9 of us. The stairwells were huge, open caverns that spiraled upward for several floors, providing ample opportunity to hurl flying objects, dump liquids, or entrap us in dark corners. As I descended the stairwell, it dawned on me that except for Danny, I was almost alone. There should have been many more people around because it was a class break. "Look out, Melba, now!" Danny's voice was so loud that I flinched. "Get down," he shouted as what appeared to be a flaming stick of dynamite whizzed past and landed on the stairs just below me. Danny pushed me aside as he stamped out the flame and grabbed it up. At breakneck speed, he dashed down the stair and handed the stick to another soldier, who sped away. Stunned by what I had seen, I backed into the shadow on the landing, too shocked to move. "You don't have time to stop. Move out, girl." Danny's voice sounded cold and uncaring. I suppose that's what it's meant to be a soldier, to survive. After gym class, Danny met me in the hallway with some unfortunate news. "You're going to your first pep rally," he said, concern on his face. Going to a pep rally was rather like being thrown in with the lions to see how long we could survive. A pep rally meant 2,000 students in a huge room with endless opportunity to mistreat us. As I climbed the stairs, I longed to sprint to the front door and escape. "They won't allow me to go in with you," Danny whispered, "but I'll be somewhere outside here." I didn't respond. I was too preoccupied with finding a safe route into the rally. Nothing had frightened me more than suddenly being folded into the flow of that crowd of white students as they moved toward the auditorium. Maybe it was because they were all so excited that I got in and to my seat without much hassle. Once settled, I was delighted that Thelma was sitting only a few feet away. Nevertheless, I couldn't relax because I was crammed into that dimly lit room among my enemies, and I knew I had to keep watch over every moment. I ignored the activity on the stage in favor of keeping up my guard. Over the next 20 minutes, I worked myself into a frenzy, anticipating what might happen. My stomach was in knots and my shoulder muscles like concrete. I decided I had to settle myself down. I repeated the 23rd Psalm. All at once, everybody was standing and singing the school song. "Hail to the old gold, hail to the black." Some students were snickering and pointing at me as they sang the word black, but I didn't care. It was over, and I was alive, and well and moving out of the auditorium. Suddenly, I was being shoved backward toward the corner very hard. A strong hand knocked my books and papers to the floor as 3 or 4 football players types squeezed me into a dark corner beneath the overhang of the auditorium balcony. One of them pinned me against the wall. Someone's forearm pressed hard against my throat, choking me. I couldn't speak. I could hardly breathe. "We're going to make your life hell, and you're all going to go screaming out of here, taking those end-loving soldiers with you." Just as suddenly as I had been pinned against the wall, I was released. I stood still for a moment, holding onto my throat, gasping, trying to catch a good breath. I stooped to pick up my things, careful to keep a watch around me. I stumbled back into the flow of the crowd. I couldn't stop coughing, and my throat felt as though I would never speak again. In the distance, I saw Danny standing in the hallway facing the door of the auditorium. "What's the matter?" "Some guy tried to choke me," I whispered in a raspy voice. "And you did nothing?" "What could I do? Talking hurt my throat." "You've got to learn to defend yourself. You kids should have been given some training in self-defense." "Too late now," I said. "It's never too late. It takes a warrior to fight a battle and survive. This here is a battle if I ever seen one." I thought about what Danny had said as we walked to the principal's office to prepare to leave school. I knew for certain something would have to change. If I were going to stay in that school, either the students would have to change the way they behaved, or I would have to devise a better plan to protect myself. My body was wearing out real fast. Later that evening, after Grandma put a warm towel on my throat, I fell into the bed, exhausted. In my diary I wrote, "After 3 full days inside Central, I know that integration is a much bigger word than I thought."